Thanks for coming. Mm, my name is Buhake. I'm a full stack Java developer for I don't know God how long, but here I am. Uh, well, I wear many hats, so not just a developer, but sometimes I do DevOps and sometimes consulting. I'm also a Jakarta EE ambassador, sometimes, and I also sometimes blog and have and my hobbies are really trying to do music and learn some music just because I'm bored or just to make time with life. I'm in my 40s, so I need to find something else to do. So, yeah, so I've been doing Java EE since 2006, so it's about 18 plus years. So that's why my talk is about Jakarta EE. Wait, show hands. How many of you use Jakarta EE or Java EE? So the rest of you are Spring people. I appreciate all the Spring guys coming. So yeah, I also run a non-profit called DevOps for Kids South Africa. So basically, the objective is to try and introduce kids to coding. Um, there are a lot in our country, so basically, especially kids from disadvantaged areas, so meaning they don't have computers in schools like primary or high school. So we try and do that, and we try to introduce them not the programming languages that they learn in most schools like Pascal. Pascal is still taught today, it's government regulated. So we're trying to get them into Java and all this cool tech like Raspberry Pi and all of these things. So that they can get riled up and probably learn uh, tech in varsity. So well, you can find me basically. I'm active mostly on X because I'm not a social media person per se, but you can find me on every social media platform. I'm probably available there. I'll probably read your messages and respond. And yeah, so X is probably the best way to get me or via email. And then just to put something for my parents because they keep asking me, I've seen your talk, but I still don't understand what I do. I basically take business come to me and say, this is our problem, we're losing money here, or this is an opportunity where we can make money. Can it be done? Obviously, I say yes, it can be done, and then they'll be like, oh, we, of course, you will have told. We expected that answer, so we told the executive and the board and the shareholders that we can be done in a month. So they're gonna do a presentation and gonna call all the journalists. So get it done in a month. I'm like, I haven't scoped it yet. Well, that's what it is. So you scope it, and then once it's done, you code, build, deploy, and then you ship, basically. So basically, I do all of that, and then with the programming with Java, basically, that's what pays me actually. And then, and like I said earlier, I use Java EE or Jakarta EE as a framework. So basically, all that process, I basically do all of that. So my work hours is, I don't even remember. I was supposed to work 9 hours in a day. Sometimes I get calls at midnight on Teams. So I hate Teams ringtone. So yeah. So to the talk. Okay. So currently now there's a application called Kwanzaa. So for uh, Kwanzaa means I think it's Swahili term for rising star or star. So we're trying to create a medical health billing system as well. So which is basically Jakarta EE based. So we're using JDK 17 with Jakarta EE 10, and so all the features that needs for the application to run is uses all the frameworks from Jakarta EE from. So the third-party provider use SOAP, so we use uh, JaxWS, and then we have some REST endpoints that we expose, so we use JaxRS, and then JavaMail to send mail, and then the front end is basically JSF4. Oh, well, it's no longer JSF, it's Faces, basically, as soon as we move to Eclipse. Database, we basically use Postgres, and the application server, I chose OpenLibty for one reason, because I like to code and see my results happening. So it does hot reload, and you can do dynamic changes to the application server without actually shutting it down. So including changing database server ports and all of that stuff and configs without if well, it's not 100% foolproof. Sometimes it's like the changes, you see the changes happen, but the result doesn't display, so you just have to restart the server. But 90% of the time it works. So it's running on currently right now on Azure. So don't worry, we have a DNS it because it's still on test mode, so we fun doing that. So you can see it's got our server name dot our region, and then the container Azure container.io. That's what Azure sends us on 9443, because that's the default port for OpenLibty using SSL. So to get started, if you're not familiar with Jakarta EE, there is a website where you can choose where you can start your project. So start.jakarta.ee. You can choose your flavor and your profile. So core profile is basically the fundamental of all the other profiles. So if you choose platform, you basically get a full profile, which includes core and your versions. And if you want to run it into containerize it, you can choose Docker support. Some of them supports, not all application server has Docker support, so you just have to play around with the configurations to see what's enabled and what's. And the nice thing about it is, whatever features is supported gets enabled, whatever features is not supported gets disabled. So you can play around with that. And because it creates you download a zip file, which is already a Mavenized project, you can run it on all your IDE of choice, including Visual Studio Code. So once you got that done, you prepare it for cloud. You basically containerize it. Like I said, OpenLibty has OpenJ9, which is already full container. So you containerize your application. So basically, you can basically port it to everybody. So what we did is, our development environment is basically containerized, so nobody has anything installed except Docker on their machines, and then everything it runs within the Docker instance, basically. So yeah, so that makes it portable for everybody. So if you run a Mac or a Windows, and well, in South Africa, all our clients run Windows, so we have no choice to also run it on Windows. But some of our developers are Mac users, so we have everything Dockerized for that reason as well. So after that, so what we did, we also took Kwanzaa, we Dockerized it as well, and we use Azure because they were the first person to respond to our request between AWS and Azure at the time. So we like the first responder wins, and Azure was the first person. Oh, public service announcement, I'm not endorsed by Microsoft to do this talk, so, and I don't work for Microsoft either. So yeah, that link basically shows you how we Dockerized our environment, but don't forget our work development environment. At that time we used Payara, so we had to hot reload Payara so that runs on Docker. So when you wrote your code, like basically on IntelliJ, and you saved your code and you deployed it, we the hot deployment was only on debug mode, so you had to set your IDE to debug mode on Payara, and then it would save your changes, see the changes done, and then hot deploy it for you. So our Postgres that runs locally, there's a Docker service for that. While there's other services, so like pgadmin, that's on line 21. So, and then there's a .inf. So this is Docker Compose 2 or more. So which is uh, a bit better than the first version of Docker Compose. Uh, yeah, basically that. So the Postgres runs first, and then pgadmin says wait till Postgres runs has started, then pgadmin actually starts, and all the variables like Postgres username and password is in the environment file. Um, so basically, you'll have to create a .env file, and then when you do your Docker Compose up, it will automatically seize the .env file, and then it links it into your Docker Compose. So you do not have to specify uh, your Docker environment variable file on startup. And then our OpenLiberty, which this is the one that we will deploy to Azure. So we're using the full Java OpenJ9, and you'll see we initially did the wget to get the jar file for Postgres. We realized that's always a problem because it never allowed us to change ownership. So what we did, we downloaded it locally, and then we pushed it in a Docker file. And then your server.xml, which is we actually customize our own server.xml for our Docker. I'll show you that later in the code. And then once we did our certs, so we got our third-party certs from the service provider, and when you push it into Docker, well, OpenLiberty only sees key.p12, so we had to push it and then rename it to key.p12 so that it can configure that. And then your target WAR file goes into config apps, and then you enable default certification. Once you do all of that, you have to run configure.sh, because as soon as you say TLS is true, it will include secure transport as well, the feature for secure transport, if I'm remember correctly, on server.xml, and then it will reconfigure your Docker image internally, and then it will run it. So once it's done, then you get to Azure. Well, you need to get an account, space, and select your region. South Africa has 3-4 regions. I think it's north, east, and west. But then as I've been playing around with all of these regions, it's only north that's got all that support a lot of services. So I had to eventually delete all my resources again, and then start with South African North. So you see my resource will be South African North. Install Azure CLI. You don't need to use CLI if you old school Windows person that likes to go online and click next finish, then you can do that. But if you want to create a script and create a CI/CD pipeline, you can actually, it will be best to start using Azure CLI and then write your shell script or whatever script to actually do all of the setup. And then obviously you need a basic knowledge of Docker and Linux basically. And I just posted the link of basic commands of Linux commands that you can currently need to know. So your services, the services that we'll use is a resource group. So basically it's a logical group where all our services will sit. So if one day you decide, you know what, I'm done with this, I don't need all these services anymore, you can just delete a resource group, and then it will delete all the services for you automatically. So, and then PostgreSQL Server for this demo. Note that that will be decommissioned soon. So use Flexible Server from Azure, and we'll use a container registry, which is your Docker registry, which is an open source Docker 2 registry. So it creates your private registry within your resource group. And then if you want to use additional resources or metrics for your container, you can use Azure Kubernetes, but for this presentation, I didn't use it. I just needed container instance, or sometimes it's called container app. It's the exact same thing, where you can run your Docker image into a container instance. And once you're done, you get a Docker portal. So that's basically everything that's attached using the CLI. That's where now it exists on the portal. So the top one is a container instance with the web address, and then the server is a DB, the registry, and yeah, the registry does not allow special characters, so everything must be in lower cases and full names. So I don't know why Microsoft does that. And then yeah, and then the resource group. So the resource group contains the container instance, the Postgres, the registry, all the firewall rules, everything is inside that resource group. And then the network watcher, that's created by Azure. So I don't know what it is and what it does. So okay, so we first log in to Azure, and then to get your subscription ID, obviously I'll remove my subscription ID. It's basically a hex value. And then your user, the name is basically your user account. So whatever you log in to Microsoft Azure portal, that's basically that. Once you're done, you get your subscription, you set your subscription. So if you have multiple subscriptions, you have to specify which subscription you want to create your resource. So you use account set to specify your subscription. Once that's done, then you select your region. So that's a list of regions that you can possibly select. And yeah, well, the list is way too long. So that's basically what you get in table format. So I choose South Africa North because that's the only location that supports a lot of these services. And if you want to know where South Africa North is basically the Sandton, Bryanston area where Microsoft head office is in South Africa. So, and then once you've done that, then you create your resource group, which contains all your services. So it's AZ group create. So I created the resource group Kwanzaa, and then the location is South African North. That's the location that I picked up from the previous command that I showed earlier. And then you create your resource group. Once that's created, then we go into the lengthier process of Postgres. So this, like I said, there's two offerings. There's single server and flexible server. Microsoft wants everybody to migrate to flexible server basically. And yeah, but for testing and for development purposes, you can try single server. It's still available to 2025, and it's fully managed, it's fully scalable. You can actually, once you create, there's a monitor link on the left on the tab. You can monitor, it shows you all your resources, how many concurrent connection that is on there. I'm basically using very less resources, so it's not for me a train smash. My bill is, I don't know how much it is in euros. It's roughly about $1,000. So if I divide by 20, it's about 50 euro. So, which is not that bad. And then once you choose your flavor resource, so for single server, it's AZ Postgres, which is Postgres single server. And then if you use flexible server, is AZ Postgres flexible dash server. So there's two different commands. So server command is basically for single server, and flexible dash server is for flexible server. But then flexible server requires there's a lot of parameters that you need to fill. So that's why I choose single server for this. And then so the list of SKUs is available. You can find it online. I forgot what it is, but I chose 5. I think there's BGen 1, 5.1 and 5.2, and another one. I chose 5.2, but by default you don't need to specify a SKU, it will choose 5.2 for you. And the storage I made it about 5 gigs I think, and that's basically it. So you're basically creating a server admin username and password, not your database, not your database, your specific database that you use for your application. That's basically the root uh, admin account for your Postgres, basically. So once it's done, you run it, and it will obviously be, it will create it for you, and it will obviously block it. So if there's no, if you're trying to hit it, it will tell you it does not understand this IP address, so you'll have to create a firewall rule for that. So once it's done, it then, oh, you will not see the JSON, but it will create everything for you, and it will show you your password. I think it's on line 36. It tells you, please remember your password, otherwise you'll never, otherwise there's a command that you'll have to reconfigure your password again. So if I'm not mistaken, and then the URL of your server name. So to verify your server name will be basically your Azure Postgres server name.postgres.database.azure.com. That's too long, but yeah, that's your server name. It's a fully qualified domain name for your your Postgres server. And then that, so yeah, so to verify that it's actually up, you type your Azure Postgres server show, and it shows you everything that's on your server. You'll see on line 6 your fully qualified server name and all the features that's available on your server. So if you have replication, it will tell you, and all the other beautiful stuff that's on there. And then firewall rule. So before you deploy your server, your container, you'll have to test it locally. So I use WSL on my machine. So in order for my container to actually talk to the database, it will need to, the database needs to have that IP address registered into the firewall, otherwise it will not communicate. So I got my WSL IP address, which I actually put over there, and then I said Postgres firewall rule create, and then I specified which IP address to actually have. So you can specify the start and end IP address, which is IP address range that you can accept, or you can specify only one specific IP address if you have a static IP address. And then once that's done, then you get the response into JSON, and then you can verify it on the IP on the portal side. So it created your allow local IP, which was basically that line where it says minus name. The dash name was the name of my firewall rule. So it's basically my server name, database allow IP, local IP, and then I say my start IP address is basically my WSL IP address. Oh, sorry, my voice is gone, so you better, don't worry if it sounds hoarse, but there's nothing I can do about it at this moment. And then once you have that, then you need to create your registry. So that's where you'll publish you'll push all your Docker images into the registry. There are 4 SKUs available, and each one has different pricing options. So I would suggest the basic one is basically the cheapest, basically. So based on your budget, you can choose which one we can have. So our Jakarta EE application, remember the earlier I showed you my Docker file for OpenLiberty, that will be pushed into the registry. So ACR is basically Azure Container Registry. So it creates a private registry within that resource group. So once that's done, and then I said admin enable because you'll need to log in as well to a bit later. So once you create your private registry, then you need to get the name. So you need to log in to get the registry name, which it will be in a form of your registry name.azure.cr.io. That's why it doesn't allow you to have special characters on your name, basically. So, and then once that's done, that's a process. Then you push your image into the container registry. So my first advice will be to first test your Docker service locally. Make sure it speaks to the database that you've created earlier. Once that works, then you push your image through to the ACR. So once you've tested your Docker and everything is hunky-dory, then you tag it using the ACR name.acr.io, and then dash your Docker image, and then you push it to basically the tag, in other words. And then finally, then you create your container instance. So basically now it takes your image which is on ACR, and then it creates, and then it basically deploys your container to go live. So yeah, that's basically it. So with the command ACR credential, you'll need to get the password first. So first you need to get the password for your ACR. Obviously I removed my password, but it's a long list, it's a very long string password. So you basically use your first password that is shown. Once you have that password, then you create your instance. So my container basically is my application, which is called Kwanzaa, and then you need to specify a DNS name, because that will be your URL for your application once it's started. So once that's done, you use container create to create a container, and then you obviously have to specify ports, otherwise it doesn't know which port it needs to make public. So your port basically makes this thing public. So OpenLiberty has port 9080 and 9443, and then you can specify how many CPUs you want to have running, and then it will scale it for you. And that's basically it. And then once that's done, somewhere in your JSON, because the JSON is too long, you'll get an IP address which is public, and then it will show you the IPv4 IP address, and then your fully qualified name. And then once that's done, you can actually now go to the website and then open it, whether in 9080 or 9443, which is HTTPS. So I don't know about time. If you guys got any question, feel free to ask. But I can show you exactly how do I make this. I don't know how you guys gonna see the there. So then I can't see. Okay, so there's my Docker image. Unless, wait, hold on. Is it possible to duplicate this thing? Weird. I guess I'll figure it out like this then. And my mouse is going wonky. Alright, so here's my Docker file for OpenLiberty, which is the exact same thing that I showed earlier. Well, you can see I've commented out a lot of these things because I've been playing around with it. I've tried to do wget to get the latest one But like I said, ownership was a problem, and oh my dear mouse. Well, let's do that. There's my Liberty Docker. There's my config. There's my server.xml. If the data source, your Docker data source is basically, it has to be a full-on URL. So, oh, what I haven't showed is basically you have to create a Postgres database as well with the command Postgres DB create. Then you have to create your database. So basically, in my case, I did a database called Kwanzaa underscore DB with my username Kwanzaa root and somewhere is my password for Kwanzaa, and then it says SSR mode is required. Without SSR mode, it will refuse your connection because everything is under a secured layer by default. So that's the only difference you'll have to do for your Postgres. It will be a URL. Like unlike previously where your data source, you had to specify property username equals that, password equals that, and all of that stuff. So that's that. And what else is a bit different? There is, yeah, and then on top of that, there's nothing much that's different though. So everything is similar. Oh yes, your library will be somewhere. You'll have to change your faucet directory to an image folder that's running inside your container. Otherwise, it does not. Otherwise, it does not know how to pick it up. So, and even though it exists, but it also has to have the same ownership as the directory where OpenLiberty is running. Otherwise, different ownership, it actually bombs out. So that's basically that. And then Kwanzaa is running, and then I do not know if. Wait, hold on. To show also that this thing is running, I've actually got Control Shift T start tab. Did I spell it correctly? Tabs. Aha. That one. So the startup service is basically a singleton bean that loads on startup. So when your application deploys before your application gets exported fully to the client, it does some initialization. So it creates an admin user, and then it fills up all the necessary databases data that it needs for your application to use. So basically, my user is basically an admin user with no password, but is basically a super user just to fill all the data that I need, like my the bank accounts and the bank types, the different banks, and the medical professions and specialities. All of that is stored using JPA on startup. So if that fails, then your application doesn't start up. Sorry, the application doesn't start up because most probably it does not talk to your database. So this is also one way to guarantee that your application actually talks to your database. And once that's done, you should actually see the database. And then now I'll have to move that over there too. Alright. I have no idea how this thing works. Okay. So this is Please enter the password for user question. Alright, hold on. I'll have to find it. Once it's done. Okay, my IP address changed. Great. So hopefully this one will open. It's not opening. Well, so much so for live demos, huh? When you thought everything works, everything doesn't work. Well, basically this is data in the database. Otherwise I'll have to configure the IP address. Well, something opened. Well, let's see. I can't see now. Where is it? Did I miss something? Where's the tables? Connected. No, that's not it. Tables. There we go. Let's take any. What did we put in? Yeah. Well, if we can create some. Oh well. There we go. Scroll. Script. Come on, mouse. Let's work with me, work with me, work with me. There we go. And hopefully you see data. There we go. And that's all the data that came from the startup service. So yeah. Now back to the slides. Alright. So essentially what I've showed is you can take your Jakarta EE application. After doing all of this, creating your Azure account, subscription, resource group, creating your server, creating your registry, creating your Docker instance, getting published and deployed. You can now automate it using your CI/CD pipelines, and hopefully when you push your code into either you use GitHub workflow, or some of you uses Jenkins. Who doesn't? And then push your code, it automatically creates your Docker image, gets pushed into your ACR, then it creates a container instance, and then it gets published into live into your online on Kwanzaa, online on to the world. So yeah. Thank you for coming. Well, that was a long process, but at the end. Questions? Oh, yes. Yes. No. Well, the only infrastructure. Well, we all all have it automated under Jenkins to do this for us. So that's the only stuff that we have. Well, company policies does not allow us unless we convince people on a high up why we need certain things, because they need to get legal and get license and see all of that. So we had to use whatever we had at the time. No, we created steps to do. Well, obviously it's still command line based, so we have our we have a configuration file where we have everything, like what I showed you, like export things into a value. We have that as a configuration, and then we have we created workflow steps to actually do all that process one by one, and then obviously gives us the all the values that you get from Azure gets into a JSON response, and then we specifically read specific values from those JSON response to carry on into some other workflow. If one of them fails, then the whole entire build process fails. All right. Yes, sir. Flyway. Yeah, we use Flyway. Mm, yeah, we needed that, but the thing with our data is we have auditing. So when you add values into the database, it says you need a created by. So we need to create a user. So yes, we could do that in Flyway, but we wanted to ensure that our application actually could talk to. So that was one way to actually. Okay, I get it. Flyway, you can also do that. Yeah, but most of the time, us we like to do things with our own hands. So, for example, we don't use JPA to create our database tables for us. We actually normalize our own tables ourselves. Then we write code to match the database tables and columns uh, specifically. We don't like to do create our tables, annotate it, and then let our JPA provider do it on create. We basically say, here's our tables that we've created on the database. Here's our entities. Do a verify to make sure that everything, all our columns changes, all our associations is actually what it is. And then if it fails, then it will obviously it will log it, and then it will not start up. So that's the only thing we do with JPA. But Flyway, yes, some places we use Flyway. Some places there's strict rules. You let the DBA create your tables for you. Like for example, in the banks, they don't like Flyway. You have to go to a DBA. DBA has to create it for you, and then they allow you the rules to say who can access it, what view you can have, and then you can now write your code to say this is my entity and match it to that. So yeah, some places, like in a telecoms place I worked with, they use Flyway full out. In the banks, there's no Flyway. You have to go through a DBA. So no. So the reason why the banks don't do that is they need to see an audit and who logged into the database, what was run, and why. So you create a request, say I need this, then a request number is generated, it's sent to the DBA, DBA logs in, and they have to put a request number. Then the script is run, or the job is done, then so that if anything happens, they have an audit trail of, oh, this dude did that because of this request. Then they can go to this request and find out why was this request logged, who created the request log, and then from there, and then they can go to that person and say, why did you create this request? Then the person can say, oh, because we had this open ticket, and you get that open ticket. So you can actually trace from the top level the whole entire chain of process. It's part of the ITSM and auditing process level agreement that banks have to have, and by law and regulations, they can't bypass it. So that's why I'm so accustomed and I'm so used to create a database, create an entity, match it all together, do a verify on deployment. If it all passes, good. You won't see any error logs. If it don't pass, then the application stops loading. I've worked on if I different industries. So some are very lenient, some don't really care. So yeah. Yes, sir. I have no. I'm not advanced in Azure as well at all. Like I said, the only reason I went to t- I used what I use now is because my time constraint was very limited. So normally, if I scope things would take time, and I would do around scoping phone a third-party provider, phone Microsoft, and say, "This is what we want to do," all of that stuff. I was like, "You have a week," and I'm like, "That's not enough." So yeah, I wish I could tell you whether the tool and the service is actually the best tool available, but I would lie to you if I say I know what it is or whether it's the best form or not. For 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 now, for because this thing hasn't gone live yet, it's still, well, it is live to the public, but it is still under testing for us. Basically, it's basically us to actually have that proof of concept, saying this is how it works, this works. Let's play around with it, let's monitor it, let's see how it goes, and then if we need to use Terraform, we'll try and use Terraform. If there's other tools available that will make it much better, we'll try and do that. So for example, now when I go back, I'll have to migrate my old Postgres single server to flexible server. I try to do it online on the portal, and the portal does not pick up my server. So, but it tells me to always migrate. And it forces me to try and migrate. The but then the thing is grayed out. So I'm like, why are you forcing me to migrate, but you do not give me the option to actually select my database? So now I have to take my database, create it with the CLI, and then try and do a migration. So that's a fun thing for me to break when I get back. Any more questions? I might move to Amazon. The funny thing is, as well, Google called me because Google is moving also to South Africa, and they said, "Listen, why don't you try and use Google?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'll try. Let me know when you guys are available, when you guys are in South Africa, so that we can try now and also play with Google Cloud." So I'll do I'll do AWS. I have a subscription at AWS. I have not used it yet, and so I still got AWS to play with, and I'm waiting for Google to actually finally call me again to give me access to the South African region, because the region hasn't been created yet. So I don't want to put it into some other foreign region and then it disappears for some weird reason. Well, I'm not saying it's gonna disappear. I'm just saying I want to try it locally first. Because, for example, our third-party provider that does the claim and the billing can only accept South African IP addresses and South African local names. Well, yeah, IP addresses. So if I put it on any other regions, it will obviously start with whatever IP address range that is provided there. So it will block it. So I need something in this region. Azure has only got one region, which is Cape Town. So that's why I want AWS. So I want to try and do that there. They're soon planning to do as well Joburg, or what what Microsoft calls South African North. I'll see, but they've got Cape Town, so I'll try and see if Cape Town will work for for this for what we're doing now. Alright, alright. Thank you guys. Thank you for coming.